Hi guys, good morning. Thank you all so much for coming today to the lightning talk. My name is Jenna and I will be your moderator. So a quick intro about myself. I am currently working in product at CharterUp, a online charter bus platform startup. And previously I was also at another startup in Boston actually. So the topic here today is something I am personally looking forward to learn more about, just being in product. So we have a lot of good stuff prepared for you today on how you can build a quality product while still moving fast and being scrappy, with what you have. Our panelists today, Michael and Rosie, will be sharing their anecdotal experiences on how they managed to build fast but well as some of their insights into that kind of product mindset. So without a further ado, let's kick off the session. Before we have the speakers present, we have 2 polls for you guys. So let's have those up. So first question is, what size company do you work for? We'll give like a minute for people to answer. Oh, there's 3. Oh, do we have another? Did you guys have another question in the poll? Did you guys add another? Oh, maybe. She might have added one. Oh, okay, gotcha. Cool. I think we could probably move on to the next one, yeah. Not a very small. And the second question is, what category is your product in? Are people able to see the question on there? No? Okay. Oh, you can't click on it.
It's okay.
It's okay. We can move on.
Okay, yeah, I think we can move on. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, hopefully you guys can do this one. If not, just let us know.
You guys can shout things out, like you could just say stuff.
And we can also do a show of hands for the people in the audience.
Yeah, we could do that.
There.
Yeah.
So how many people are, what's one of your goals right now? Understanding the market, anybody? Prioritizing what needs to be built? Iterating on the product? And monetizing their product? And anything else anyone is doing, and you can talk to the mic.
Thanks, Puck. Good morning. So we have like 30 free customers in a closed beta that are willing to give us like lots of feedback. So we've given them equity. It's in a pretty formal program. We have a team that I would say is very good at like diagnosing, being really thoughtful, but we're entering execution phase and we're not iterating. We're not getting product shipped in a small form fast enough to get feedback. So the build, test, learn loop needs to be faster. I'm not an engineer, but I'm the CEO. And so I'm looking for advice or resources that come in and can come in and look at like how we're doing that from product design, engineering, and then testing to tell me like who I really need to like hire to iterate faster. Cause like the opportunity is all validated. So that's what I'm trying to get at.
Cool. Yeah, I think we can probably kick it off. Yeah, we'll have Michael come up first, and then we'll have a short Q&A session for his presentation, and then we'll have Rosie up and do the same, and then we'll open up questions to the public.
All right, can everyone see that? Yes, okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to Startup Boston Week, Build Fast and Break Things. I'm Mike Gianfrido, and I'm just gonna share just some of my experiences through kind of my personal playbook and professional playbook that I've put together throughout my experience as an entrepreneur and as a product manager. So the product here that you see on the screen, it's the liquidware Amber. It was a product I developed well over a decade ago, and it's my biggest product failure. This is here to remind us all that our understanding of the market is somehow wrong and flawed, and our understanding of our product is somehow incorrect and wrong. And it's important to try to figure that out as quickly as possible so you don't build this beautiful, ugly baby. So a little bit about myself. I live in Watertown with my partner Maria and our twin sons, Grant and Harris. Professionally, I started my career entrepreneurially. I founded a company in my dorm room, grew the company, took over 20 products from concept through deployment, and was able to repay all of my investors and then some when I exited 10 years later. But at the end of that exit, I was really frustrated. I felt like the company hadn't reached its full potential, and I felt that the reason why was because I hadn't reached my full potential. So I continued on to really learn the finance piece of the product. I felt being able to plan new product launches was essentially important. And I really wanted to learn product. So I spent the last 7 years working with MIT startup spinoffs, deploying disruptive technologies. And that's really where I'm going to keep my focus for this conversation is going to be on the early markets. So a lot of times this is where you have a solution looking for a problem. This is where you might have a game-changing technology that can have an order of magnitude improvement, either on the cost or on the efficiency or on the efficacy of your market or of your customers or users. And so that's where really I'm just going to keep this conversation going to be pretty in the earlier stages. And in the early stages, it's just going to give some pointers for that. So, so just first, whether or not you're a product manager, you can be an entrepreneur, developer, designer, it doesn't matter. You're doing product management is such a impossible task that everyone needs to feel ownership over the product and everyone needs to be able to contribute to it. Because as Matt LeMay says, product management demands learning to be wrong. And the more people you bring into your trust circle and you have contributing to that product, the quicker your team will help you figure out how you're wrong. And then just for people that really aren't familiar with product management at a really high level, the idea is you're looking at the market, you're trying to prioritize what to build, what to test, and then you're gonna build that and ideate internally, and then you want to test it as quickly as possible. It's just an infinite loop of doing that at some level. So just again, just kind of level setting. So really, early on when you have these disruptive technologies, it's a dream. One of the projects I worked on was wireless charging. And it's this dream that wireless charging could charge phones, it could charge laptops, it could charge cars. There's all these game-changing things that you could do that'll fundamentally change the way people interact with their devices. And really the idea is that this product is going to live in the market in a way that you can monetize it, and you can create value. And then there's the feasibility, which is where the technology actually is today, where the customers are, and what reality is. And what you're trying to do is really bridge that gap. And that's the product roadmap. That is, you're trying to reconcile taking reality and making the dream come true. There's a lot of risk there, and you're inevitably wrong, especially when you're in these early stages where your technology is not quite mature. I'm going to continue to kind of level set here. So really there's kind of the way I see it is that there's really three major areas of product management. So one of the companies I worked at was Motional autonomous robo taxis. And one of the functions we did, one of the focuses was B2B, customer driven product management. This is where you're defining your product in a way that the customers, your customers will actually pay for it. They'll actually give you money for your product. And you're really trying to define the product in that light. And then there's more user-driven product management. This is more B2C. This is really where you're defining the product in the way to drive user adoption and make it an enjoyable product and give the users value. So one is more customer value, the other is user value. And then later on, or earlier on before that, is what I call kind of your holistic product management. This is kind of the foundation that you would do when you're deploying a disruptive technology before you even have clarity on who your customers are and honing in on your exact customers and exact users. And at that point, you want to look at the market holistically. So from the Motional perspective, B2B would be, the robo taxis would partner with like Lyft and Uber. And then the users would be, Lyft and Uber's customers who are actually using your product and riding around in the robo taxi. And then, looking at the market holistically, that's considering things like, the government. You have the federal government, you have your state government, and you have your local municipality. There's other people that aren't, just walking around the roads that aren't even using your technology, but are bystanders and stakeholders inevitably of it. And in order to really understand how the product's going to live in the market, you have to do this holistic product management. So getting to, kind of this point here is you start, typically with your products, you start with a problem. And you really try to understand that problem, define that problem, and you come up with a solution in the product. When you start with with a solution looking for the problem, you're actually doing it almost backwards. And it's really important that you have this game-changing technology that maybe has an order of magnitude different impact. But what you really want to do is you do that to kind of come to this point to say, I think it could solve this problem. But then you have to divorce yourself from that solution and from that dream, that you could use this technology to monetize the market and really go to the problem that the customers are having that you think you can solve or the users are having, and define the product in that light. Sorry. All right. So really, this is, you start to get into kind of design thinking and speculative thinking, and you start to get lost in this loop as you start to build your problem hypothesis and your problem statement, and then you work really hard to, understand what that is and hypothesize a solution, and you want to test it, and you put it in front of users, and you're thinking about the future and thinking about how the users' lives will change in the future and how your technology will be impacted by that. And you're really you're getting lost in here because you're trying to test multiple different hypotheses all at once. And what's really important is, as you're going through this process, you're really being intentional, especially when you're early on in the technology adoption lifecycle, because you don't fully know how the future will play out, and you don't know if your solution will actually deliver the results and what other things you need to do to wrap around your product and your solution in order to make the customers actually adopt it. So this is really, you're really kind of working in a lot of different modalities. You're diverging, converging. You go to one meeting, especially if you're, in product or you're a founder, you'll go to one meeting where you're really thinking creatively and you're diverging and trying to just understand the problem. Another point, you need to make a decision. You need to converge and you need to bring the team together in order to make the decision. So it's very easy to get, to get lost in this cycle. And really, kind of as you start to get lost, you end up in what I call the distraction zone. And it's important to understand that the word priority, when it was originally introduced to the English language, it was singular, meaning that only one thing can be priority with respect to everything else. And getting yourself to that point of clarity where you can really, bring yourself to the point to understand what is the thing that will make the biggest impact and help tell me that I'm wrong sooner, will get you there. So that's really, like, whenever you meet with, a customer, a team member, everyone sees, you're walking down the street, you see something, it reminds you of something else, and you're starting in a distraction zone. And it's really important that you get into the discipline of being able to filter through that noise very quickly, and very intentionally, to be able to understand what is most important. Do I understand this well enough? And can I prioritize it? And really the goal is to get into the focus zone. And once you're in the focus zone, you can really only get there by converging and doing subtraction, removing things, saying these things are less important and these things are not as important as these other things. And really, and when you develop your product hypothesis, that's really what you're looking for, is you're looking to get to this point in which you can figure out exactly what point you want to test. So whether it's doing speculative thinking, design thinking, user testing, you're developing a hypothesis about your product and it's somehow wrong. And you have to get into the focus zone to do an intentional test to understand, where the customer is. So I'm going to tell a story about my first entrepreneurial experience. My business partner and I, when we founded the company, we worked really well together. He's the best engineer I've ever worked with, still to this date. He could solve any problem. And he would always be asking the question, what is the solution to the problem? How do we solve this problem? And he'd be able to drive to a solution, no matter how technically challenging it was. And he'd be able to drive to a solution. And that's solving the problem. And we worked really well together because I'm the type of person that would say, let's understand the problem better. Let's hypothesize this. Let's figure out what this means in a system setting, and really try to understand the problem at a conceptual level. And then we had our third partner who came on board, and investor, and he brought a whole new light. He said, should we even be solving this problem? And by having that dynamic of understanding that really there's, when you're in a meeting, when you're trying to solve a problem, it is really important that you get everyone on the team at the right level of understanding. Should we be solving this problem? Is this the right problem for us to solve? And then really diving in to understand what the impact of that problem is, and conceptualizing it. So so as you're going in and you're testing your product, it's really important that you're understanding what you're testing. Like, is this the right problem? Is this the right product that we want to be launching? Is this the right architecture for solving this problem? Or does this solution even solve the problem that we're trying to solve? Does our product resolve the user's challenge? So the other thing that I find is really important is creating a culture of planning. Always being able to look in the future, because early on, when you have these early technologies, typically the bottleneck to, and critical path to deploying the technology is that new technology. That's what's stopping you from getting to that point where you're actually monetizing it and getting that mature enough. And then once it's mature enough, then you can build the things around it to actually monetize it. But early on, you just don't know. You're operating in orders of magnitude of error, potentially years of error, and you really just don't know. But you have to build the plan so that you can figure out where the failure points are, and how it's fundamentally flawed. And really the key is what you're trying to do is you're trying to balance all of these things that you have going on. So you have people at certain points, you might need to think creatively. You might need to think critically. You might have an advisor that's saying, okay, you need to do a pivot, or you might need to double down. And you're going to get multiple different signals from your customers and from your users. And it's what's critical here is that you get to this point in which you're able to balance analysis and execution. And when you're talking about early on, there's just so much you don't know that you have to really, you're dealing in the world of a lot of hypotheses, and analysis is really critical as you're trying to figure out, what the problem is you're going to solve, and can your technology even do that? And then once you kind of get to this point, once you get to the point where you've actually figured out, that you think that this is, a problem that your technology can bring order of magnitude improvements to, that's really where you're really going to start, spending a lot more time on the execution, and balancing that out. So that's I'll share. I mean, I can go and give examples if anyone has any, questions or, wants to understand a little bit better.
Anyone in the audience?
Mhm.
Good morning.
So you teased us by saying that product was your great failure.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your process and how where this process didn't get applied, or why it didn't work, or what your learnings were in that context?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so really, it was a hardware product, as you could see. It was running Android, and it had applications on it. And really, what happened was we went too far along in building the product, and actually building the hardware. And this is, I find this with machine learning algorithms, computer vision, classification type algorithms, but also with hardware products, is it takes a long time in order to build the product to a point in which you could test it. And what's really important is that you test it before. There's a lot of things that you could test before you spend the time collecting, millions of dollars worth of data to train your algorithm, and writing these really complicated annotation protocols and spending all that money. It takes a lot. So anything that you could do beforehand on the analysis side to test it before you've overcommitted is really critical. Thank you.
Do you feel like that's still the case now that all the large language models are basically infrastructure? Do you feel like with AI that's still the case now that OpenAI, Bard, Anthropomorphic are doing all the magic for you?
I mean, the answer is it really depends. I mean, if you're trying to build your own classification algorithm from scratch, or something for like a specific type of data set, and you want to actually annotate it to draw it out, that takes a longer amount of time. But if the more you could leverage stuff to test your hypothesis quicker, that's what you want to do. Is you want to fail as quickly as possible, and be able to test and find out how you're wrong.
Could you share an anecdote where your advisors wanted you to do something, but you didn't think that was correct? And how did you know that? And what did you do about it?
Yeah, so I mean, it happens all the time where you have your own experiences and your own anecdotes from talking with the customers, and your advisors have a lot of experience. The people around you have a lot of different experiences. So there's certainly, I'm trying to think of a specific example here. But I know that there was definitely a point in which I had, there was a product that we were working on, and early in my career, I was more likely to, listen a lot to my advisors, because I lacked the confidence to lead and to be able to make the decisions myself. So I'd listen to, take a lot of influence from, other people, and that's definitely led me, to failure. By taking their advice. And other times I was arrogant, and I would go ahead and say, no, I know this is right. I know this is what the customers want, and go ahead and build it. And inevitably be wrong. And it takes like a lot of it's like learning how to ride a bike. You're just gonna fall, and you're gonna listen to your advisors, and you're gonna be wrong, and you're gonna listen to your gut, and you're gonna be wrong. And the more you do it, and the more you find a way to prove yourself wrong, and prove your advisor wrong, and just figure out how we're wrong, and you just get good at doing that. And it just takes a lot of experience.
Hey there. In the consumer market, when you're talking to your customers, is there like a certain percentage or like a X out of 10 that you'd expect or want their feedback to be positive to kind of validate the model? Like if 2 in 10 are absolutely using the product day to day, or 8 in 10, like is there a point where consumer adoption is just going to be too difficult?
I mean, that I think that it really depends. I don't know that I could answer that. I think it depends on what you're testing, what you're really trying to achieve as a business. So I don't feel like I could really answer that without without more context.
Cool. I think we could probably move on to Rosie for now, and then we can open up questions for the public later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Technical difficulties. All right. I'm going to focus a little bit more on tactical execution and how do you take these great concepts that Mike is talking about, 90% of which I agree with wholeheartedly, and one thing I completely disagree with. And how do you put that into practice really day to day, hour by hour? You're having product conversations. You're going to get back to your desk after this. You're only going to have a half a day. You have a whole day's worth of work. What are you going to spend your time on? What are you going to work on? How do you decide? How do you decide quickly and get going? A little bit about me. My background is in mechanical engineering. I started my career in biomaterials research while I was earning my master's degree. From there, I moved into medical device design and development, where I learned the very in-depth, lengthy, documented waterfall process that is medical device design and development. I also learned that I didn't really enjoy writing FDA submissions for 6 months out of the year every year. And I shifted into consumer products. Working at Shark Ninja, great place to work, learned a ton. And now I am leading product engineering, operations, and various other things at Suvi. For those of you who don't know us at Suvi, we are a Cambridge-based startup of about 40 people. We're making the meal kit that cooks itself with a proprietary smart kitchen appliance. Sous vide refrigerates your food, then switches to cooking automatically so that dinner is ready right when you get home. It's really a game-changing, convenient solution for busy professionals like us who don't have enough time to put dinner on the table every day. And really where it gets interesting from a product perspective is that it's 3 businesses in one. We have a high-tech hardware product that we're working on. We have a high margin frozen meal subscription, and we have all of the software that ties it all together. We have a mobile app, we have our firmware on the appliance, and we have our online meal planning software that lets people go in and choose what meals they want. So a lot of product challenges. How do you integrate those? How do you work through it all? Lots to do. So before we jump in here, one quick note. We're talking about building fast and breaking things. We're never talking about breaking things with regard to safety. Safety is always number one when you talk about priorities. It's not something that gets deprioritized. It's always the default. It's non-negotiable. So for the purposes of this talk, when I'm talking about deprioritizing things that aren't as critical, safety is always the most critical. So just keep that in mind as we go. So step one in any of these conversations is to do your homework, to know your business. Big companies tend to separate business strategy and product development. A lot of companies do. My opinion is that that's really where startups have the advantage, is that the conversations around product and the conversations around your business are the same conversation. Otherwise, you end up at odds with each other, where you have business folks trying to say, oh, margin, 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 profit, 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 and you have your product folks saying, oh, but customer experience, customer experience. You want that all to be together. You need to build a great product that makes money. You, as a product person, can go and build the best product in the world. If it's not going to make any money, it could be perfect, every feature. If it doesn't make any money, you have a great product, but you don't have a business, right? So always you want to keep it in mind. You want to always have that in the back of your mind for every product conversation. And it starts with knowing what your metrics are. So this is a very simple version. You've got your average selling price times your margin minus your advertising cost. For some of you, if you're just selling a single product, that's it. For others of you, you have recurring orders, you have recurring revenue of some kind, you have your recurring order value, your margin, your number of orders, right? Pretty straightforward. You probably use different language than we use, or you have some other metrics that tie in here. Know what these are. If you don't know, maybe you're in engineering, you're in product, and that you're not as exposed to that side of the business, go ask lots of questions. If you're the person in product management or engineering who's asking these questions and driving the design process in a direction that makes your company more profitable, you're going to quickly become a product leader and you're going to be everybody's favorite engineer. A couple more things to note about your homework project here and knowing your business. Know your channels, know your market. Do you have a lot of constraints here? Is there a timing constraint? If you're trying to develop a remote work SaaS software solution and you miss your window and you launch right in 2022 when everybody's talking about back to office, you could have the best features in the world. You're still going to have a lot of challenges because you missed your window. Same thing for holidays, seasonality, things like that. And then know how you're selling. Know who your competitors are, know who your customers are. My recommendation on this, and Mike touched on this a little bit, is go build your website. If you're wondering if your product is going to do well, go build a website, go put it on a whiteboard and ask yourself, okay, would I buy mine or would I buy my competitors? Which one's better? Then build a better one. Build a version that you can put online and test with real customers and see what they do. And then you're going to go learn what's important to them. More importantly, learn what's not important to them, because there's probably some things that feel important to you that are not as important to your customers. Get that real data. Yeah. Sure, go for it.
So you're a 0 to 1 startup that's at like 0.33.
Go build a website.
What?
Go build a website.
So
Okay.
My question
Yes.
is, if I can't do everything on that, prioritize this list for me. There's a famous quote from Paul Graham that says, most startups die by suicide, not murder.
Mm-hmm.
So don't over-index on a number of things that are on the list, but I'd be interested in your prioritization.
You're making me jump ahead a little bit here, but one of my slides later is just fucking get started. Don't overthink it. So when I say these things, don't take a ton of time to investigate these things, right? You know what your timing is roughly. I mean, it's pretty hard to predict macroeconomic conditions, so there's not a lot that you can do there, but just have a rough sense. If you're doing something that's dependent on a current trend, know that it's going to be finite, right? And have a rough guess in mind and keep that in there. In terms of how you're selling, maybe you don't know that yet, and maybe that's okay, but keep in mind, if you're going to sell on Kickstarter, you're going to have different customers than if you sell on D2C, right? If you're making a website and selling D2C, those customers are going to be very wary of scams. They're going to be very concerned. If you're selling on Kickstarter, it's okay if you take 6 months to deliver the product. If you're selling D2C and you take 6 days to deliver your product, they've called the BBB, they're canceling their credit card, they're freaked out, right? So I mean this in like a very rough sense. Don't spend like years and years on this. Spend an afternoon doing a little bit of research. That's kind of my advice there. Who are your customers? It's tricky. How do you know how much to do, right? You're not going to know your customers that well, probably ever, right? Like there's always going to be an evolution. There's always going to be more new customers that are coming at you. When I say who are your customers, use that broadly if you're in the very early stages to know, okay, my customers are Kickstarter customers, say. So they are going to be pretty chilled out. They're going to be okay with some mistakes, some issues. Use your channels to influence the bigger picture, the broader picture of who your customers might be. And assume that there's kind of a broad range of customers out there for you. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
Yes.
We can talk more.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've done your homework. You've got your background, your business metrics, right? Next step is to eat your own dog food. What I mean by that is use your product. Use competitive products too. The best way to know your product is to use your product. For me, luckily, that means I get to eat gourmet chef-prepared meals with zero effort every night. And I'm also taking credit for dinner that's being cooked across the country for my husband right now. So, it's great for me. And to the points that I think a couple of people touched on in the previous talk, Sometimes you miss things when you're using your own product only. That shouldn't be your only thing. Show it to your family. I get insights from my husband all the time that I don't notice myself. And, have your kids use it, have your partners use it, have your friends use it, have different people use it and give you their honest insights and feedback. And the best thing about this is that it's an instantaneous feedback loop. And every time you use your product, you're going to find some little thing. Maybe it's a big thing. Sometimes it's a little thing. Sometimes it's this aha moment where you're like, why didn't I think of that before? This would be great, right? And it's instantaneous. You could spend a lot of money and a lot of time sending your product out to people to test it, gather insights, collate those insights, distill those insights. If you use your own product, you're going to develop an intuition on what your product should be. And then you should trust that intuition and use it to develop your priorities. So, speaking of priorities, you want to wow your customers. We all want to wow your customers. We all want to build a perfect, shiny, wonderful product. But we need to use a little bit of restraint because most of us in startup are resource limited, shall we say. You're going to have a lot of different customer touch points. Some of them are going to be totally neutral. That's fine. Neutral's totally okay. Some of them are going to be, frankly, not that good. That's also probably okay, especially if you're working with someone like Kickstarter customers. They're going to forgive a few things. Most customers will forgive a few things. If you have something that's really wow, if you have that one feature that is the purchase driver, that is the thing that makes them refer other customers, that makes them love it and use it and build a habit around it, those are your wow features. Most products, you only need one. Maybe two, maybe three, but most products only need one. Your job as a product manager, as a product leader of some kind, is to figure out how few you can get away with, and which ones are actually the most critical. And there's a lot of great ways to do that. My suggestion is you have a list. I'm sure every single person here has a list of features that you want to work on and develop. Am I right? Yes, everybody's got their feature list. Okay. How does this work? Okay. Take that list, throw it away, and put it on a plot instead. This is a really, really useful way to visualize your projects and figure out which ones are going to be more important. This is one example. There's a couple of different ways you can plot it out. Pick a plot that works for your business. Going back to your business metrics, what are the things that are important to you, right? This one on the x-axis, we have how often is your customer experiencing a particular touch point? And then on the y-axis, how awesome or totally shitty or totally neutral is that, excuse my language, I hope you're not offended. Totally neutral is that feature or is that experience. And literally go, this is a whiteboard exercise. Take 30 seconds to a minute. This shouldn't take you weeks. This shouldn't take you all day even. Do this for like an hour, right? And put things on this matrix relative to one another. Do that, this one here in the audience is the person that I do this with. And, haggle about it, argue about it, talk, okay, is this one more wow or is that one more wow? Does this happen more often or does that happen more often? And you'll be surprised when you lay things out relative to one another, how you're gonna get a much more visual picture of what's actually important in your company. So now you've plotted all of this out, just go ahead and throw away the whole left half of the plot. Unless you have an absolutely, absolutely terrible experience that you need to fix, you'll know if you need to fix that. If it's not happening very often, focus first on the things that are over here, that are the things that are really great that are happening all the time, the things that are really bad that are happening all the time. Scrub out those detractors, work on those wows, and then slowly work your way inward and over towards the left. And you know what? You're gonna have time later to work on all those other features. You probably have some really great ideas on the left side of that plot. You'll have lots of time to work on those later. So another way you could look at this is effort versus impact. We did this the other day. Plot out your projects and how long is it going to take you to develop and release those features versus how much of an impact does it have on your customer. Now the impact scale is something that you could adjust. You can kind of pick what you want to put there. Do you want to put impact to your financial metrics? Do you want to put impact to your customer experience? Those are things that you can kind of figure out. For us, we literally put a rough guess of EBITDA impact on there. And we were like, all right, so, if this project, increases this metric by 5% and this and that, whatever, a little bit of back of the envelope math, this one's going to be $200,000 EBITDA impact and this one's going to be $1 million. So I guess we're going to work on the one that's going to be $1 million first, right? Like it really quickly comes together to visualize things this way. And of course, I'm going to skip through this a little bit, but a couple of other points to just keep in mind as you're having that conversation introspect a little bit. We all have that little bit of bias. We all have that feature that we really want, that we really love, that maybe isn't in a favorable place on these plots, but we're like, oh, but I want it. It's going to be so great. Let that one go first. It'll come back later if it's that good. And you know what? For some of you, it probably is that good and it'll keep coming back, or maybe it's in exactly the right spot on this plot, in which case, go do it. But as a default, throw away that one thing that you really want because you might just be a little bit biased. Innovate where it matters. Yeah. That's a great question. You're going to have a lot of haggling, and you don't always need alignment. More importantly, if you're the product leader, take control of certain things and be the product leader. You don't ever want, and I know one of my colleagues is going to speak to this a little bit more in the next panel, you don't want to design by committee. You don't want to have everybody having an equal voice, frankly. You need to have one person who is owning and driving the vision for your product, taking a lot of insights. You certainly don't want to design the product for one person, and you don't want to be making totally unilateral decisions. You want to be gathering a lot of input and insight from a lot of places, but using that instinct, that intuition, all the homework that you've done, and using your own product and competitive products to drive a direction that you know is the right direction. I actually have a slide in here that kind of illustrates this a little bit that I had skipped. If you design by committee, you're going to have a lot of things pulling in a lot of different directions, and you're not going to get anywhere. If you have one person driving a singular vision, even if that's not so much in a straight direction as I have it depicted there, and it's a little off to the side, you've still gone a lot further than you have if you've designed by committee and you have a lot of perfect little pieces that are disjointed and they don't come together. So my advice on that piece is to take control, take the leadership position, know when to fall in with somebody else's vision if they're driving a pretty good enough vision, when not to fight about it, and when to say, you know what, this is the way we have to do it. It's better to be aligned than to be all over the place. Okay. The next point I have is to only innovate when it matters. Don't reinvent the checkout. Like, don't spend all your time reinventing things that have already been done. If you're making a website and you need to design some filters, go look at Amazon, go look at Google, copy the best. You don't need to spend time reinventing things that already exist. Focus on the things that are your big wows, your big wow features, and everything else can be totally neutral. And lastly, don't avoid difficulty. If our CEO and founder, Robin List, had avoided difficulty, we would not be here where we are today. Creating a refrigerated oven is a technically complex, difficult project that took many, many years of R&D to get right. But that's our wow feature. The ability to schedule and time shift is our wow feature. And without that, we would be nowhere. So we're here for the hard projects. You guys are all here for the hard projects. That's why we work in startup. Don't cross things off of your list just because they're difficult. Now, we already talked about this one a little bit, bias towards action. Just get moving, right? So my only caveat on that is around technical debt. So embrace a little bit of technical debt. You're going to have some. I mean, who here has heard somebody who probably works for a big company say, oh, sure, there's not enough time to do it right, but there's always enough time to do it twice. Yes. Okay, my husband says it all the time, so he works for a very big company. Sometimes there is more time to do it twice. That can be accurate. If you have to do it twice and the next time you have to do it is 3 to 5 years down the line, great, do the quick and dirty version, right? Now, that's not an excuse to be disorganized. Find the little 30-second wins. For instance, I was the victim of some technical debt a little while back where I was working on our website, and I found that whoever had previously designed our website had made 37 different versions of a call to action button where somebody had gone and thrown it together and sent it to the devs, thrown it together, sent it to the devs. Take the extra 30 seconds to put it in your Figma team library, define a font variable, define a color variable, and publish it. It takes 30 seconds. And that now I can reuse, right? And if I want to make a change to that, it's not a bunch of work to untangle a mess. It's a quick change that can be implemented. So find those little 30-second wins. It's never an excuse not to be disorganized. Put stuff in the right folder, create structure a little bit at a time. You want to build and you want to layer. And you're going to get to a really great place if you do that. If every time you touch something, it gets just a little bit better, take that 30-second win. Don't spend, days defining a perfect Figma library from that example. Just get that one little win. And finally, across everything, don't forget to constantly be learning and building skills. we're talking about balancing swift execution with quality output as if it's a pure trade-off, right? Like, it's not just fast or good. Go learn skills, and you're gonna lift both scales. You're gonna go fast and good. Never be afraid to take a little bit of time to do that. As an example, my VP of global sourcing the other day showed me that he has a spreadsheet that he's been working on that has a bunch of manual tasks, and it takes him a lot of time. And he went and he learned a little bit of Python. This is somebody who has zero engineering background, no programming background, but they learned a little bit of Python. They used ChatGPT to troubleshoot their syntax. They got it figured out, and in a few hours, they had all their tasks automated. So take the time to go build skills, because building skills creates you more time, and that's how you're gonna get there.
Great. Awesome. So because we had questions kind of in the middle of the presentations, I think we'll probably do about 2 questions for Rosie, and then we'll open it up both for Michael and Rosie.
Great. And when you ask the question, just say your name, where you're from, and fire away.
I'm Alyssa. I work at Trender AI, early stage startup. I was wondering, so I'm a UX designer, and it's been really difficult to keep my own confidence as we keep going up, almost getting product market fit, and then go back down and barely have any customers. Do you have any advice on, like, leadership is still kind of trying to figure it out, but as an emotional person and a designer, sometimes I'm like, oh my God. Thanks.
Yeah. Is this thing on? It probably is. Okay, great. It's hard. It's definitely hard. Embrace some of the ups and downs. Do you ever listen to How I Built This on? It's a great podcast. It's on NPR, and every story is like, man, it was rough for a while there, and then eventually they get into a successful place. We've all, I think, probably been through some of those really hard times, and it's difficult. Take a little bit of a break, take a step back from it, talk to different people than you usually talk to. Go read a book or watch a podcast or a masterclass or something. Like, get out of your own headspace and get into somebody else's perspective, and you're going to start to see your business from a different light. And that, I find, can be really helpful. Taking a little bit of a step back instead of just grinding on the same problem. Take a pause, take a broader view, and get into someone else's perspective to get a new flavor. And sometimes that can be really, really refreshing.
Do we have any questions from the online?
Yes. And so Martin was interested if you guys could elaborate a little bit more on building the culture within an organization on how to do this.
Well, this is actually where we disagree, I think, because you were saying create a culture of planning, and I'm saying create a culture of go, go, go. And the two aren't always at odds. I think Robin would say the plan, Robin's our CEO, the plan means everything. The plan is everything. The plan means nothing. Is that what it is? And it basically means go build a plan, but don't be afraid to deviate from it. And you're going to be pivoting. Take that longer outlook, but don't take a long time. This is my perspective anyway. Feel free to disagree with me. Take the long-term view, build a plan, but don't spend a ton of time building like a detailed Gantt chart of every single step between now and the next 5 years. It's just not going to really happen. Get that long-term view, jot it down somewhere, and then be ready to pivot and adjust as you go. Expect and accept and embrace those changes, because it's going to change. And just get started, and you'll find out what those pivots are going to have to be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, actually, with your take. And when I say build a culture of planning, what that means is getting people in the room and squinting to look at what the future could look like. And it's really executing everything that you shared in your tactical slides, which I think was really good. It's going through that process of saying, this feature is more important than this feature, and it's going to take this long to build. And that feature is less important. That feature is going to take that long to build. And, I loved your matrix there where you plotted in, get to ahead with those conversations, and figure out how you're wrong, what the future could look like. Because especially with like the early technologies is when you're doing your planning, you can't be right. You're going to be off by years. So you don't want to spend the time building a detailed Gantt chart. If you do, it's going to be at a very rough level, that something you could do in a half an hour in a room with just some really, really sharp people that you're working with.
Cool. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions, and then we probably have to wrap up.
Great. In the room?
Oh,
Someone's added a quote here. A bad plan executed is better than no plan at all. Cool. Another way to look at it. I like that.
I actually have a question for you guys. So how do you know when you break something really well?
For me, it's when you break it fast and you learn from it quickly. And if you can do that, then you're golden. You can break as many things as you want.
Yeah, I think when you learn from it, when you break something properly, you proven yourself wrong in some way, and that can fundamentally change the way your hypothesis can evolve going forward.
Cool.
I always tell our team, like, we want you to fail fast, but you have to know why, like lean into why. If you don't know why we failed or why we succeeded, so we're trying to get people to like use a piece of technology that we want embedded into their daily lives, which is like super hard to do. So knowing why, I think, is the key. So the fastest path to why is sort of what I try to encourage our team to do.
Gotcha. I think we can maybe answer the last one and then we could wrap it up, the virtual one. So the question is, when you have a large customer requesting an important feature, do you ever move fast to build for a large prospect? What guidelines do you use?
I can answer that from, like an early technology standpoint. A lot of times your large customer is this visionary person that really has a plan built on a dream, that they can take your technology and make an order of magnitude improvement on it and really make it, their own product more efficient or better or more competitive. And I think it's important to understand that, that's one customer, that's one perspective, that's one point of view. But it's really important to, try to come up with realistic expectations and being able to move forward with that customer so that you're not, overcommitting your limited resources to something that you can't undo, and you can't uncommit to. So that's the guardrails I'd give for that.
I would also look at, what are you trading off? What are you losing by doing that? Is there another feature that serves all your other customers that you're more confident you can implement and that all those customers are going to use? And how confident are you that this customer is going to stay a customer? How, are they definitely going to use this feature? Sense check it a little bit and make sure you understand what you're losing by taking that on, if anything. Maybe nothing. Maybe that's your great opportunity.
One customer is a small sample size.
Can be, yeah.
But it could be a good signal too. So
Awesome. So I think we'll wrap up here. We had a full session today, so hopefully you guys get a little bit of break before the next one. But thank you all for coming.